I have some great terrible neighbor stories for you today, and you're going to love the title story too. Here's our first one. A very lengthy saga about Kevin and Melanie, my neighbors from heck, by LaShayla Rose, with an update. I moved to a quiet village in England at the beginning of last year. My neighbor on one side is a nice elderly lady who lives alone. We'll call her Edith. We swap baked goods occasionally, and the neighbor on the other side was a middle-aged man. Around February, he got arrested and moved, and the house remained empty until a couple in their late 20s and early 30s popped up. We will call them Kevin and Melanie. It is important to note that I own my home, while their property is managed by a rental company that specializes in providing properties to people who cannot afford deposits. We are terraced houses. This rental company owns everything on the street up to my house. The houses are kinda L-shaped with the bathrooms added to the back downstairs and then a yard bordering the bathrooms, making the properties rectangular. My yard is connected to Kevin and Melanie's yard, and my master bedroom and living room share a wall with their house. My second bedroom, office, bathroom, and kitchen share a wall with Edith. On the other side of Kevin and Melanie are a single mom who I'm friends with, Valerie, and her 16-year-old son, Tom, who is a very nice and respectful young man. Kevin and Melanie introduce themselves the day they move in to me and Edith. They seem fine, and for the first couple of weeks, they remain fine. And then the noises start. At first, it's just very loud TV and music. Occasionally, I hear raised voices and banging of doors. It doesn't bother me much. I spend my time in my second bedroom and office, so the only time I hear much of this is when I walk through the living room and hear the hum of whatever they're listening to. But it is much louder for Valerie and Tom, who share more property walls with them. Then one night, around 1 a.m., I am woken up to the sounds of them doing it so loudly it's as if I'm in the room with them. This becomes a routine. Anywhere between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., I get woken up and have to spend 20 minutes of my life listening to them bang. Sometimes, if I got lucky, it would be 2 or 3 times a night. And then sometimes in the morning between 6 and 9 a.m. Realizing that they are just not going to stop, I knock on their door and try to awkwardly explain to them that the walls are very thin and I can hear everything that goes on in their bedroom overnight. They pretend that they don't understand me, and then they slam the door in my face. Then the blazing rows begin. This couple seem to communicate only through verbally assaulting each other. They take a liking to doing it in the middle of the street, sometimes out the back of their house, sometimes out the front. It becomes apparent that they are taking drugs, and as the days slip past, they become louder and angrier. So I open a noise complaint with the council. Several houses on the street become very quickly fed up with them. After being assigned a nice lady at the council, we go through the process of sending them a warning letter. She tells me they will probably guess it's me because my main complaint is, "Lord, I just want to stop hearing them bone." I say that's fine. It's not fine. The day they receive the letter, I also receive a letter with instructions to download an app to my phone that records their noise. They kick off. Not at me, but at each other. This argument lasts 3 days, and on the 3rd day, I'm sweeping my yard outside when Kevin exits the property. Out of reflex, I say, "Hello." He kindly responds by telling me to "Freaking chat to me, you freaking snitch, I'll break your freaking neck." I put in a police complaint about threatening behavior, and a couple of days later, an officer comes to my house. I explain everything that is going on to him. He speaks to them, and they deny everything and scream so loudly I can hear them in my house. The officer comes back to mine, weary, and says he's told them to knock off their behavior and he's sorry he can't do more. I say that's fine. Once again, it's not actually fine. By this point, they have also gotten a puppy to add to the nighttime noise routine. At one point, I have to call in sick to work because the puppy has spent all night crying and howling, leaving me awake for bordering 24 hours. Meanwhile, both me and Valerie have been making solid complaints to the rental company, the police, and the council. The police are at Kevin and Melanie's house roughly 3 to 4 times a week for I don't know what reasons. Through sheer coincidence, I stumble on their Facebook accounts and discover that they have 2 kids that have been removed from them. I wonder why. Kevin has multiple Facebook accounts. Melanie's account is just covered with pics of her kids covered in hearts, making posts about how hard it is to be a mom. I am Thanos snapped out of existence simply through the sheer power of cognitive dissonance. Suddenly, the puppy vanishes, inspiring another days-long fight after it emerges that Kevin sold it without Melanie's knowledge to afford something. Neither Kevin nor Melanie work, and this is often a fight between them two. I continue my council noise recordings. Their constant fighting does not improve the nightly sessions for me, although you might think that it would. The council lady comes out to install a decibel monitoring box in my house. On the day she comes, Kev and Mel are having an absolute rager in the street, and she texts me to ask me to come out of my house and get her because she is frightened of getting out of her car. She installs the box and the monitoring continues. A while later, one evening, Valerie goes out shopping at the local supermarket. Tom, being 16, takes a bath and plugs his phone into a speaker so he can listen to music. Kevin and Melanie decide that Tom's music is too loud for their taste. Instead of handling it like normal people, they wait until Valerie is pulling up in her car outside and then kick off outside, screaming that they'll screw her up, that he has just gotten out of prison and Mel is pregnant and he must protect his prego fiancé. Yikes. The police are called. They deny everything except that Valerie's Ring doorbell camera records everything. The police take what they can and pop away after warning Mel and Kevin not to interact with Valerie or Tom or any of their family who comes to visit. You and I both know that Mel and Kevin do not stick to this. Eventually, it gets far enough that the council lady informs me that she's been in contact with the rental agency and the police, and they are putting a community protection order on them. She sends them a letter telling them to knock off all their shenanigans. The lettings agency asks the landlord if he wants to evict, but I don't hold high hopes on that one, as I assume the landlord will want his sweet rental paychecks. That weekend, I am out doing some maintenance in my garden when they arrive home with a friend and have a loud and pointed discussion about how it is illegal to record people without their consent and how their friend fixes windows for a living, and if anyone gets their windows broken, he would ensure that no one in the area would come out for it because everyone knows him. I don't know him. I ignore them, I finish my maintenance, and as I'm going back inside, Melanie hisses, "Disgusting lesbian," at me. I'm not a lesbian, readers and listeners, but I do have a visible pride flag in one of my windows. That night, they roam the streets and threaten Valerie's brother as he rides his bike up to see her. So, after this, I call the police again. So does Valerie. Valerie, by this point, has also involved her son's social worker, as Tom has learning disabilities and sometimes spends time in respite care, and his social worker is responsible for making sure that he lives in a safe environment. The social worker, Henry, after witnessing firsthand Mel and Kev's shenanigans, also decides that he's going to get the police involved. I decide to buy a camera for my backyard. I don't believe that Kevin and Melanie will do anything, but since they don't like being illegally recorded for the council, I'll do it some more. The police make an appointment to come see me on Tuesday. Me, Tom, and Valerie install my camera in my backyard on Monday. Kevin and Melanie come outside to watch us, so we have a loud and pointed discussion about the features of the camera, such as motion detection and anti-tampering devices. Because I know it ticks them off, and by this point, I decide that I'm allowed to be petty. I angle the camera on the wall so it covers my whole backyard, but none of theirs. But if you looked at the camera itself, you might think it does. So Tuesday rolls around. I arrive home from work. It becomes apparent that they are in the middle of one of their ding-dong rows. Melanie is stalking the back street, screaming about how they are finished. I have no idea how long this has been going for or what happened, but I know the police officer is coming and that this bodes ill. The officer arrives at my house about an hour later. We have a long discussion. He goes to see Valerie and Tom, and they discuss things too. Edith knocks on my door and asks for my help with her mobile phone and tells the officer some things that she's seen and heard. He asks me if he speaks to Kev and Mel, what sort of outcome do I want? I tell him that I want them to pretend that I do not exist, do not speak to me or about me or in my vicinity. I want to live in peace and quiet and for them to just shut up. That's it. I don't think this is unreasonable, but I do warn him about the argument earlier and the fact that I do not know if they are home right now. Officer goes to knock on their door. They are, in fact, home, and they lose their utter minds. Valerie texts me as the screaming begins, but from our houses, we cannot hear exactly what is being said. I pick up a few words here and there, but nothing that would allow me to string together the conversation. We wonder if the officer is going to call for more officers and other neighbors start opening doors in the street to check what the heck is going on. Eventually, Melanie slams the door in the officer's face, and he simply gets in his car and drives away. About an hour later, he calls me back, opening with the line, "Well, they are charming, aren't they?" which makes me feel vindicated just a little bit. He tells me they denied saying anything to me and that because there is no evidence, he can't progress with my complaint, which is fair and reasonable and what both me and the officer thought would happen. He does, however, then tell me that they complained to him about the camera that I put up the previous day in my yard. Their opinion is that I am recording them in their back garden, and that is illegal. But the officer disagreed and tells me that this really upset them, and they have said that they are going to make a complaint to the police separately about my camera, but not to worry about it because I'm not doing anything wrong and I installed it for my own safety. An officer might come to my house, but they will likely say the same thing. I tell him that I'm more than happy for them to come and look at my camera, and he wishes me well and hangs up. On Wednesday, I arrive home from work and pop into my kitchen to make a coffee. Seconds later, Kev and Mel arrive in their garden to watch me. It is just peeing down with rain. They have clearly been waiting for this all day. I do not look at them. I make my coffee and leave, and they go back inside. Today's Thursday. It's 3:30. They've been slamming doors and shouting at each other up and down the road. I am very tired, but they did not do stuff last night, so I got 10 hours of sleep. At this point, I think I'm simply going to have to put up with this until they start getting fines and arrest. But I'm super open to ideas that'll expedite the process, and well, it was cathartic to write this all down, and I could use some virtual padding. The brand new update. So, what can I tell you guys? I got home today from work and they have vanished. All the windows and the blinds are open, and the house is empty. No one on the street saw them leave. Edith saw the man walking into town this morning with a letter in his hand, but that was it. I'm assuming they had a van drive up the back streets in order to get all the furniture out, but my camera didn't catch anything. There is nothing left except trash all over the floor of the living room and some of the kitchen. They left dog crap all over the yard. The gate is broken, but they must have untied it, and it's just miserably swinging in the breeze. I did phone the lettings company to let them know, as yesterday they were offering Avon catalogs to people on the road, but I probably won't find out what happened. It's none of my business. If I had a guess, I knew that in special circumstances, the lettings agency could order a 48-hour eviction notice. So I am wondering if they received that and have appropriately Thanos snapped themselves out of my life. They may still be in the area, but I honestly don't care. I am free. It is over. I have ordered myself a celebratory KFC. As much as I want to know what happened for sure, I'd just be glad that they were gone. OP, so glad to hear that everything is good, and what a pleasant surprise for you. My racist, thieving, trespassing neighbors, posted by Gingerbread1313. This is going to be a long one, but I'm angry, so here we go. For some context, I, a female in my 20s, moved some states over for college, but it didn't work out as I struggle immensely with anxiety and depression. When my mom came out to visit me, she discovered that my apartment basement was filled with mold and had the crazy idea to buy me a fixer-upper home for stability while I got better. Her plan worked, by the way. I graduated and I'm now working in a hospital and beginning to pay my mom back. I know her plan was crazy, and so much I am forever grateful for the chance that she gave me because I would not be here today without it. But I digress. In the summer of 2021, we found a house, cute little Italianate built in 1869. Needed a ton of work, like electricity, bathrooms, and kitchens. This was a fixer-upper. But I loved it, and my mom loved it because we like old things. The best part of the house is it can easily be divided into a duplex, and we plan on renting one half out. There was one problem though. There was a garage almost behind my house that the realtor claimed was our garage, which made sense. It was so close to the house. We didn't think much of it. My mom bought the house and I moved in January of 2022. 2 weeks after I moved in, my next door neighbors, renters, moved in next door. Straight away, they were parked in front of my garage. So I went out to inform them as politely as I could that it was my garage and they could please park elsewhere. My neighbor, a male in his 30s, let's call him Gunner because he has an equally stupid macho name in real life, told me that I was wrong and explained to me that the property line was at this weird angle, so even though the garage was behind my house, it was on his property. I was so shocked, but he showed me a tax map and he was correct. He pointed to some old standalone fence posts between my backyard and his driveway and garage, fence posts that I previously assumed were remnants of a backyard enclosure, not a property division, and he noted that they were at a slight angle like the tax map. He was right. So I stood at the end of the driveway with him and adjusted where I stood until the fence post lined up with my eyeliner. "So this must be the property line?" I asked him, to which he immediately denied it, because I was standing in the middle of his driveway. He went on to claim that the property line must either go through my house or around my house, since the driveway was 100% his, apparently. Further, he claimed that his landlord promised him they could park their cars side by side, implying parking in my driveway in front of my house, which was ludicrous, although a neighbor later informed me he saw them doing just that at one point. So we're at an impasse here. Gunner had shown me the tax map, and it seemed clear that the diagonal line did intersect the driveway halfway, judging by the old fence post and the way his garage, my shed, and my house were all lined up. But he claimed the entire driveway was his, so we had to clear this up, and fast. How to do that the best? My mom hired a surveyor. That was a thing itself. When the surveyor found the property stake completely on the other side of Gunner's driveway, showing the skew was more diagonal than the tax map showed, Gunner decided it was a good idea to go outside and scream and yell at the surveyor like a toddler that, "This can't be right. If this is right, then I don't have a driveway." Reader, they had plenty of space for a new driveway. But the survey was right. The fence posts were actually off kilter. Gunner continued to harass me, even going so far as going outside late at night to watch me park, to ensure that I didn't park on his property, I suppose. He and his girlfriend, Karen, had continued to yell and harass me over the property, even after we all knew it was mine. I even found it ridiculous they cared this much, since they are simply renting the house and the landlord didn't seem to care at all whenever we contacted him, but I digress. We got approval from the landlord to properly mark the boundary line, and in doing so, Gunner came out to scream at us that we were breaking the law, that changing the tax maps was illegal, and my mother suggested that if we were breaking the law, we could call the police for him, and that shut him up rather quickly. From then on, things quieted down a bit. I ignore the jerks next door, they ignore me, and life moved on. Slowly though, they began to forget. They drove over all the property markers that we set up, destroying them. Staying on your own driveway must be absolute rocket science, judging by how hard it was for these people to do. But one day, Gunner saw me in the backyard and randomly proclaimed that we were too close to neighbors to hate each other. I was all too eager to bury the hatchet, so I immediately agreed and we began to talk. While talking, he complained about the whole situation, making my mother out to sound like a crazy woman who was in the wrong, and he admonished me for daring to call the police since he and the cops don't mix. I'm no fan of cops either. What else was I supposed to do? Well, I am non-confrontational and anxious, so I sort of crumpled and apologized for every single thing. It was in this conversation that he casually revealed that he occasionally steals my firewood for his fire pit. I was shocked. I had noticed absent-mindedly before that the woodpile was smaller than I remembered, but this made it click in my mind. Gunner and Karen have a fire pit, but they don't have any wood of their own. At the time, it looked like that they had stolen 30 to 50 logs, including all the logs that I had split into quarters for my own wood-burning fireplace. Gunner invited me over that same night for beers in his garage with him and Karen and some of their friends. I was still in shock over the firewood, but I agreed. Of course, at the small party, Gunner and his friends proceeded to steal 3 logs while I was there. All the while, Karen was desperately whispering through clenched teeth that I was sitting there. Obviously, someone knew it was wrong, but she didn't apologize either. Besides that, it was an awful party. Gunner is extremely racist, referring to rap music as a slur, and then saying that slur no less than 20 times the entire time I was there. In front of his young children, no less. He and Karen repeatedly swore and cursed and made sexual jokes and references in front of children as young as 2, which I found highly inappropriate and distasteful, but maybe that's just me. I left the event not knowing what to do, but I worked up the courage the next day to ask him kindly to no longer steal. Karen didn't even look at me, and all Gunnar did was laugh it off and say that he had stolen one too many. I took a photo of my woodpile for comparison purposes further on and went about my life. I graduated school, I got a job, and finally had the time to check the pile today. And what do you know? 20 to 40 logs gone. I lost it. Right after doing a freaking blood donation, I moved all the firewood inside the shed, and I locked the shed with a brand new padlock. I'm so done with these people. There's so many other details that I left out, but Gunnar constantly claimed everyone loved him so much. Wonder how much they'll love him when I tell all the kindly neighbors how big of a racist, lying thief that he is. Can't wait for the shed. Also, I want to note that after finding out that he stole from me months ago, I didn't tell anyone, wanting to give Gunnar the opportunity to do something as simple as not steal. I also forgot to mention that they keep their dogs chained up outside all year, even in the New England winter. Not huskies or anything, mind you, short-haired, sweet dogs. Sean BZA in the comments says, "Hi Sean, why have you not both laid a charge against them and recorded them screaming at you and gotten at least the paperwork started for the landlord to either evict them or sit with the lawsuit is silly. You need to stop letting them run over you and get both cameras cheap enough now to record them stealing the wood and tell their landlord that you're going to hold him accountable for any time they either steal your wood or trespass on your property or scream at you or drive onto your property." OP says, "Unfortunately, there's nothing to do about the dogs. We tried. I live in a small town and there's no law about tying your dogs up outside. Stand your ground, OP, because if you don't, he's going to continue to take advantage of you." How would you handle this if you were OP? Neighbor is suing for $3,000 for the cost of half of a fence. Our neighbor is suing us for the cost of half of $6,000. When we moved into the house almost 2 years ago, she approached us within the week that we moved in, introducing herself, very friendly, and then proceeded to say she wanted to replace the fence. We let her know that we wouldn't be able to at that time because we had just bought the house and didn't have the extra money. We hadn't talked to her about the fence since then, except one time when my husband repaired the pickets with brand new ones to make sure that our dogs didn't bother her. Her son saw that we were replacing pickets and praised my husband for it, stating that as long as we can just replace pickets as needed, it would save us all money, and we agreed. So fast forward to last summer, our neighbor that we share our back fence with gave us a 3-month notice that she was going to replace the fence entirely due to her huskies getting out all sides of her fencing. So we asked her if she needed us to cover any part so that we could save for it. She let us know that we wouldn't need to pay for it, and then we thanked her. 3 months later, when it was the weekend to replace the fence, our neighbor let us know the day and the hours that the company would come to work and just asked us to let our side neighbors know that construction would be happening, which we did. Upon going to the lady's house on our side and letting her know as a courtesy, she tells us, "Well then, I want to replace my fence as well." So we let her know that we weren't the ones replacing our back fence. She then stated that she didn't care and that she wanted the fence replaced and she was going to have a company come and do it within 2 days, and we would owe her half of a brand new redwood fence that would match the rest of the fencing in her backyard. We shared a cedar fence prior, and we told her that we wouldn't be able to do it on such a short notice and that we weren't going to split the difference for premium materials. She did not listen, and that Saturday, we woke up to someone tearing down our back gate and replacing the fence. They even came to knock on our back door, asking to borrow axes and shovels because they didn't bring any tools. We weren't going to, but she started screaming that we were trying to hinder her fence build, so we let them borrow tools. It took them almost 3 complete days to replace the one side of the fence. They never put our gate back onto the fence because they said they weren't paid to. So my husband had to go buy materials to reattach our gate and to fill in pickets between our gate and the fence. We later received a certified letter stating that we owed her $3,000. We emailed her asking for an itemized receipt that we never received. A month after the fence was installed, we had a lot of rain. The fence started bowing and falling over, and her landscaping company had to fix it. Almost a year later, she is now suing us for half the cost of a fence build. We really don't want to pay for an overpriced fence that we didn't receive adequate notice about and wasn't even installed correctly, and could need replacing soon due to how horrible it was completed. Is there any way we can win the lawsuit? Do you agree with this? It basically says you have to put it in writing to make it happen, and it just depends on the laws of the state. If it was falling apart, then you both share responsibility. But I'm saying, like, if it's not, then it is on them. What would you do in this situation? You know the owner? Really? My stepsister and her girlfriend rent a house that my boyfriend and I purchased, rehabilitated, and remodeled in a college town in central Missouri. They are on the lease with some fellow students at the local college. So, in a 3-bedroom house, there are 5 girls. My boyfriend is over often because he takes care of a lot of the gardening and the task that requires some heavy lifting. He had warned me that the next door neighbor is a bit nosy and seems to be the old biddy type, despite not being elderly. Just for those keeping track, that's 5 girls and 1 guy that routinely comes over. I haven't really even been to the house since we finished it until this last weekend. Someone had suggested that some small garden boxes along the side of the house would be nice so that they can plant some herbs and maybe some vegetables come springtime. And I am all about that since I'm the green thumb of the couple, so I went over and I built some terraced garden boxes along the side of the house, each about 4 foot by 3 foot, so each bed was about 3.5 foot wide by 3/4 of a foot. Why am I doing this right before winter? Well, basically, so we can make sure that the boxes are draining properly without losing too much soil from the box due to runoff. So I'm just finishing up when the old biddy Karen makes her appearance. The conversation starts off rather normal, even though I can tell that she is digging for some gossip to be able to tell the women's group at church. And then she beckons me closer and says, "I know you're just the hired help and you're here just to do a job, but do you know what this house is?" No, what is this house?" I ask. "Well, I don't want to get involved, but I figured I ought to warn a pretty young thing like yourself that this is a brothel," Karen says, her voice lowered conspiratorially. I ask her what proof that she has of this, and she explains that she saw a man here about a week or so ago. We collect rent on the 5th, and he was telling the girls that they had to pay him. She then goes on to explain that when he went to leave, my stepsister and her girlfriend both gave him a long hug. And I ask her if she has anything else, and she says that she sees a mixture of people coming in and out, mostly men coming and staying for a couple of hours or so before leaving, which really ain't that unusual for 5 college students to have friends and classmates come over, like for study groups and for group projects. My mistake is that I ended up rolling my eyes and clearly appearing uninterested in listening to her further because she started to huff. "I see you aren't concerned about these young girls and their welfare. I bet that pimp has you in on it too. Well, I know the owner of this property and I'm gonna call him and report what's going on to them." This is where I knew I had her, because my boyfriend and I own this place outright, and I don't even know her from Eve, and she clearly didn't know my boyfriend from Adam. "Go ahead, Karen, why don't you call him over?" I say to her. Well, they live in St. Louis, and you know what that means," Karen says. No, I really don't know what that means." I push, just trying to figure out if she innocently just means that it would take the owner too long to get here, or that the owner doesn't care. But St. Louis and Kansas City have also become a bit of a dog whistle for black in this part of the state, and that is exactly what I think she means by it. Almost confirmed by her stuttering over her words and repeating, "You've got to know what that means." "You shouldn't have said nothing. You're exactly what's wrong with this state. Now I need you to go take your bigoted butt back inside and leave us alone. And if I hear about you harassing them that live or work here, I'll have the police right here ain't like and in a hurry to snatch you right on up," I said. This did have the desired effect of making her go away. What I failed to foresee in my anger was Karen calling the police and claiming that I threatened her. My stepsister came out shortly after Karen went away and was talking to me about her and some of the rude comments that have been sent to her and her girlfriend's way, from "bless your hearts" and "y'all need Jesus" to "you women are going to heck. It was about this time that the police roll up and start asking me questions about what was going on with Karen, as they had gotten a report that someone matching my description had threatened her. So I relate to the officer more or less what happened above. It's at this time that my stepsister asked the officer if she can show him something on her phone. The officer says yes, and my stepsister proceeds to show him a video with audio of the conversation and this lovely 6-foot+ tall police officer that is also African American also picks up on the unspoken meaning of St. Louis owners, and he is clear that it gets his hackles up, and my sister then proceeds to show him videos of Karen's harassment towards her and her girlfriend. He gives a clip, "Y'all can go back inside, but don't go far, I'll be right back." Us all being biddies in training immediately gather round the side window that allows us to overlook her front door. He marched up to her door and gave it 3 thudding clubs against it before waiting for Karen to come out. Unfortunately, he did not have the conversation on the porch with her, but I will say this. Even with all of her doors and windows closed, we could hear the officer's raised voice. He came back about 5 minutes later and told us that he had warned her to leave us alone and to stop harassing us. Before leaving, he gave my stepsister his card and said that if she starts up again, to give him a call and he will get us a no contact order and charge her for harassment. It's been 4 days and Karen won't as much as look in the direction of anyone in the house. Hopefully this is the end of it. I feel like this Karen acted like she had everything in mind and knew what was up, and then whenever it came back in her face, she caved. How would have you handled this one? Want me to unload my own trailer? Okay, I needed a vacation anyway. Posted by Arrow the Observer. So I was a trucker for a while, and that comes with plenty of stories of crazy things in so many places. One of my favorite stories, however, comes from a piece of malicious compliance that came together just perfectly. The setup. I tend to be a bit on the lazy side when I can get away with it, and I searched for quite some time to find a company that would keep me far away from unloading the trailers myself. I found a good one that had a 95% drop and hook rate, which is where you drop off a trailer full of goods and then grab a new one that's either loaded or to take to the next pickup. 4.9% of them are either handled by the receiving dock or by lumpers, which are dock workers hired by the warehouse companies specifically to unload trucks. That 0.1% is a list of places that just want to watch you work or be convinced that you really shouldn't operate their lifts. In my contract, I saw that there was a place where your hourly rate for unloading was stated, not for the hours that you were sitting and waiting to be unloaded, but for when you were the one unloading your own trailer. So I also saw that the contract allowed for alterations to be made to the price of this service to be charged to the customer. As a joke, I put in not 1, but 2 extra zeros. $1,500 an hour for unloading a trailer? Should deter most people. Most people saw that, got a good laugh, and then pulled in someone to unload for me. The event. Most people, like I said, were smart. This run was set to arrive at 3 o'clock to a certain clothing store in the mall. Let's call him IB Nickeled. I'd been to the store a few times before, and it was always the same manager, Mr. Dime, receiving me, and it was always the same runaround. If I wanted to get unloaded, I had to wait for someone to get there, and then I'd have to sit and wait while the poor kid back there got the load off, and then I'd have to wait for traffic to ease up to get out, since it was always almost 10:30 by the time I finally left, leaving me with only a couple of hours left on my clock to get to a truck stop for the day. I got there and, yep, Mr. Dime had come in to accept the load. It was always hard to be smart at 3 o'clock, and I can only imagine that was part of Mr. Dime's usual runaround. This time was a bit different for a few reasons. One, he smelled like there was a bit of an herbal calming remedy about him to settle his nerves for the night. 2, he said that he was completely understaffed and there was no one around to unload me, so I'd have to do it myself. 3, I couldn't stay to my usual time because he had to leave before 5 o'clock. To be fair to him, I did try and say, sure, but my contract says, I don't give a dang what your contract states. I don't have anyone in until the store opens, and I've got an appointment that's more important than some trucker's contract. Just unload it yourself. I considered it for a moment and went back up to my truck to get my tablet. This was in 2019 before the virus, and the company had just swapped over to tablets for certain things, like signing off on expenses or getting permissions. Mr. Dime was fuming when I came back and handed him the tablet. Yeah, just read through and sign with your finger. He didn't read through. I had 20 pallets at 1,500 pounds each. The only available tool to unload was a manual pallet jack. I started my work clock and began unloading at 3:15. At 5 o'clock, Mr. Dime looks on in satisfaction to see me about 3/4 of the way through as he's out the door. At 5:15, Mr. Dime's replacement, Mr. Quarter, of the day shift, comes running in with his face white as a sheet to see me taking off the 4th to last pallet. Please tell me that I'm reading this wrong," he pled fruitlessly. "I wish I could," I lied, knowing that Mr. Dime was about to be up a muddy creek with a spoon. I even tried telling Mr. Dime what he was getting into, but he just skimmed and signed. He slumped. Wait here, I need to call my district manager." "Better be quick. I want to be out of this lot by 6:30 to beat the morning rush and get a good breakfast." He ran back, and I continued unloading. When I finally got the last pallet off at 5:50, I turned off my time clock as the district manager came in. We'll call him Mr. Dollar just to keep consistent, followed by Mr. Quarter, who was looking somewhat relieved, and by Mr. Dime, who was somewhere between terrified and furious. "You're Mr. Arrow?" Mr. Dollar asked, holding a printout and looking to it for the name. "That's me," I agreed. "I take it they sent over the contract Mr. Dime signed?" "Yes, and that's just it. Mr. Dime is accusing you of forging his signature on this, since there's no way he'd sign off on a multi-$1,000 contract just to unload a trailer, especially since he claims you insisted on unloading it yourself." I whistled. "Whew, that's a heck of an accusation. Hey, is that the CCTV I see up in the corner over there?" I asked, knowing full well that the entire loading dock was covered by a slew of cameras. The one I pointed out was positioned just right to catch the whole conversation at the door. "Mr. Quarter, get the footage," Mr. Dollar said. "We don't have audio, but we do have visual on them." Mr. Dime lost his fury and now just looked petrified. The fallout. One review later, and I was grinning like a loon back to my truck. I called my manager, booked some home time, and walked away with enough money to last to the end of the month. The next time I went into that IB nickeled, there was a new, much more sensible manager who always had a man on staff to unload the trucks. A quarter tank, also posted by Arrow the Observer. So, a while ago, I posted a story about IB nickeled and their nonsense. So, let's go back a bit further now to another story from my first trucking job, in my first 6 months as a trucker. The company I worked for was infamous because every new guy lasted about 90 days. This story is about that company and what got one of my managers fired, all because of a simple request to be fueled on a short haul load. This load was dog food coming over from Sparks, Nevada and dropping at a distribution hub in Sacramento, California. My last load had been dropped a couple days before and I'd been sitting there waiting because I'd requested some home time. I lived in San Bernardino County, California at the time, so yeah, already in a bad mood from that since it killed my vacation days I'd saved up from that time. Lots of stories from this company, but I'll move on since this story is about me getting payback on that guy. So, I've been sitting for a couple of days. It's late August, I've been hot, and I've been running my rig for AC at night. I finally get my dog food load and notice that it doesn't have a fuel stop. The pickup is in 30, so I shoot a message over the Qualcomm unit to ask for a fuel stop. Due to this being a short haul load under 200 miles, you will not be assigned fuel for this load. Cool. My gauge is on a quarter tank, but I'm sure they know that, right? I shoot them that info just to be sure and get no response while I'm picking up my load and getting ready to leave. Finally, I call my manager. Note that it's been around 10 years since then, so apologies for not having the conversation perfectly memorized. "Oh, hey boss, you know I'm heading into Cali, right?" I asked. "I just need a fuel solution." You're good, dude. Just get this load done and we can get you fuel." He was, annoyingly as ever, ignoring my concerns. That's just it. I'm in Nevada at the moment, and as soon as I get to California, the price will jump." I tried explaining. "It's only $2.50 over here, but my uncle said it was nearly $5 in Sacramento right now." You just get rolling. I'll figure something out if it's really bad." Well, I tried, and I was feeling particularly mad after the fiasco with my home days. So I set off, doing some mental math. I was loaded pretty heavy and going over one of the more annoying passes in the US. If you've done Donner, you know. I get up to the top of the pass just fine, still a bit over 1/8 tank left. 200 gallons worth of tank, so about 20 gallons, at an expected 9 miles to the gallon on the downhill with Jake's at full. Let's do this. Sure enough, I roll down the mountain with just enough gas to get me to my drop on Sacramento's harbor, then have down to the yard just enough gas to get to the 49er truck stop, the only spot my company had for fuel at the time in the area. My engine cuts in and out as I pull into the island. My manager is on for another 5 minutes or so I give him a call. "Hey, I just got to the truck stop and my rig is running on fumes. Can I get some fuel?" He was rushed and annoyed since he wanted to get home, just like I wanted to at this point. I still didn't expect what I got. Yeah, just fill up. You're authorized for 220 gallons, so you can get the reefer too if you have a trailer." And with that, he hung up. For those who don't know, August 2012 saw prices through most of California going back up to just over $4 a gallon. The 49er, who had somewhat of a monopoly because they were absolutely massive and the only major brand out there from what I knew at the time, were charging $6.50 or so per gallon. I'd just been given carte blanche for a full tank. I still remember the gallons and the price readout. 203.89 gallons at $1,309.55. Yep, $1,300 on a fill-up that normally costs about $400 on the extreme high end in the rest of the country. I went to bed knowing there would be a storm of epic proportions the next day. I was 21, annoyed, and fully willing to roll with whatever was coming because I was spiteful. Sure enough, I got a call from the night manager before the sun even came up. "Arrow, what the frick is this fuel bill?" Pull the Qualcomm messages in the call log from last night," I replied before hanging up and falling back asleep. When the sun was up, I had a message on my Qualcomm from my manager's manager, along with a new route directly to my home terminal. My manager had been fired, and they wanted to see me in person to figure out just what was going on. I got there, and after a couple of meetings, they gave me a week off and transferred me to relief and recovery. I have some horror stories from that, but those are for another time. For that day, I had just won against the single most annoying boss I'd ever known and had finally gotten myself a bit of time with my parents and brother, which was good enough for me. Hey, you're just doing your job, you need the gas to do that job, he tells you what to get when you get it, you try to help, he doesn't listen, you're doing it malicious compliantly. One by one, posted by the portable door. I was recently reminded of this story from a colleague. I work in contracts, meaning my department audits sign documents to make sure everything is legal and compliant with our policies. We have a very old system that we use. Think like early DOS, like a black screen with white words and you type everything manually. It looks like Pong. So typically what happens is I would get a contract for specific mechanical equipment and I would review to make sure it's possible in a physical sense and that the finances also make sense. Occasionally, we'll encounter a situation where we need to update our system to allow a contract to go through. This would be if we sold an older equipment that we no longer build but had a few spares lying around. Or if a client bought our equipment from a third-party provider but wants us to service it since we're the official company that makes this stuff. It's kind of like a car dealership selling a used car that they don't make anymore. It's still part of their brand, but they might not necessarily have software to support it since it's so outdated. Trying to explain the best I can. When we have these types of contracts with older equipment, all we have to do is send a note to a person in a specific department and ask her to open the system temporarily to allow these devices to be added and serviced. The way we send this request is that we fill out a form and submit it to this lady. This lady is something. Anyway, she's a combination of a power-hungry overlord and a scared, pathetic mouse. It's very interesting to see. I sometimes play a game to bet on which mode she will respond with. She's very much a bully who cries when she gets called out for being a bully and then says she's being bullied. Yeah, she's fun. So anyways, one day I received 85 new contracts, same client, all for used equipment that we don't make anymore and have not for years. Someone found a whole bunch of them for dirt cheap and bought them and now want us to service them. Cool, good find, Mr. Client, we'll be happy to help. Typically, you submit one request form per device. Filling out the form is a bit of a pain because it's a very manual process and a bit time-consuming. I like to be efficient and make life easier, so I did some reviewing and noticed that there are really only like 5 models of machines. 85 different serial numbers, but only 5 types. So I sent off a quick email saying the following. Hi lady, not her name, but I'm calling her that here. Hey, I have a whole bunch of machines to add to the system, but I don't want to submit 85 different tickets to you. I checked and saw there's only 5 model types. Can I send you the request in batches by model? Might make our lives a bit easier than going one by one. Now, this lady is notorious for sticking to the rules. I don't usually mind because rules exist for a reason. However, they were also created by people and therefore can be changed by people. In this instance, I was hoping lady would understand that I'm trying to save us both some time. Nope. Her response was, "It is unacceptable that you think you have the right to change the way we do things, especially that you don't even work in my department and have no concept of what it is that I do. We do not work however we want. We have procedures to follow, and if you are unfamiliar with these procedures, then it is clear to me that you need training. A new level of which has been achieved." You want me to follow procedures? You don't want to understand that I'm trying to help us both? Let's go then. I spent the next 3 hours creating my emails and ticket requests, but I didn't submit them as I went. Oh no, I waited until I had 85 of them ready to go. Once they were loaded, I spent a hilarious moment clicking send. It was like I was launching little torpedoes every time I clicked send, each causing small devastation as they build up in her inbox and overshadow anything else that might have been in her queue. Also, I know she keeps the volume on, so I know she was hearing that dang ding that has traumatized Outlook users everywhere. One by one, 85 different requests were running to her inbox like moths to a flame. I waited for the inevitable tantrum. "Hey, I see you're sending me a bunch of requests. Can you just bunch them together? This is a lot and it's messing up my system now due to the constant influx of emails and tickets." Did I forget to mention that our laptops are also super old? That many emails in one shot most definitely froze her Outlook for some time. I replied, "Oh, sorry that you're having a hard time. I was just following procedure as per your request. I already sent them all, so nothing I can do." "Well, how many requests did you send?" 85. "What?" I then put my status to out to lunch. Have fun, lady. I'm getting a sandwich. Psycho Karen neighbor destroys property and files a false police report with an update. Click the video on your screen to find out what happens to Karen, and I'll see you there.